1. I was out of town with my wife on vacation, and she forgot to pack her curling iron. We'd been out for a couple of days, but she wanted to look nice for a dinner party we were going to, or something like that, which is irrelevant to the story. We wanted to buy a new one anyway, so I started searching for options online to see if a local store had one she liked. To our surprise, not only was the one she wanted in stock, it had a huge discount and was available for pickup at a nearby store. I won't get into details of where the store is or what its name is, but it's a large enough chain to have stores in all major cities across the country. So we place the order and drive to the store. Go to the hair products section where we're supposed to pick it up, and this rude lady who seems to be in a hurry, in a fast and annoyed tone, "You can't pick it up yet. We need to send it from the warehouse. That's exclusive for online orders." We can see there's a bunch of them on the shelf next to her. Also, I'm aware that some stores do work under this stupid process where they need to receive online product purchases first and give you those instead of what they have in stock for various reasons. But this wasn't the case. We've done this before, and they'll just grab one from the shelf and give it to us. There's no serial number or anything that could make this one different from the one they would have received to fulfill the order, so this lady was just being rude. She said there was nothing she could do even though she could see our order as confirmed for pickup. At this point we would have cancelled the online order and purchased it in the store, but this lady really pissed us off and it didn't have a discount there. So here is the malicious compliance part. We told this lady we'd cancelled the online order and we wanted to buy one from the shelf. She immediately changed her attitude and sold it to us without complaining. We went back to our Airbnb. My wife used it for that particular event and for the next few days. When I called the store to confirm that her online order was ready, they said it was. We went back to the store and guess who was there again? So we go to the counter and ask for our order and she gets it for us. She didn't seem to recognize us, so as soon as she gives us the online order package, I tell her that we need to return this too and give her the curling iron we bought from her. Then she recognized us and just stood there watching for a few seconds. Then she goes back to her bitchy tone and asks why we're returning it. We don't need it anymore. She calls her manager and tells him that we're asking to return a product that doesn't have a problem and that we are returning it because we don't need it anymore, like expecting him to tell her not to proceed with the return. He obviously tells her that as long as it's within their stated 30-day period after the purchase, it's returnable for any reason unless we damaged it. The manager leaves and the lady doesn't say a thing after that, but we can clearly see she's pissed. We get a full refund and leave with a brand new curling iron again. We later found out they can, in fact, just grab any product they have in stock if they confirm an order, but they need to do some extra steps to match it to their inventory later, and that they don't get a commission. So this lady was probably expecting to pass it on to the next shift. So in short, there was no reason for her not to fulfill our order other than wanting a commission and being lazy. In the end, she wasted more time and didn't get a commission from our purchase. 2. A few years ago, I worked for a very large city as a subject matter expert. Part of my job was delivering training to unionized employees all over the city. I was both the manager and the person who delivered the training, so I did the scheduling, picked the location, etc. Housing prices in my city were crazy, so I lived in the suburbs and commuted by transport. My commute each way to my office at our main corporate office downtown was 2 hours. It was a bus ride, then a train ride, then a subway ride, and then a walk. My workday ended at 4:30 p.m., and I would be on the 5 p.m. train, which would get me home for 6:30 p.m. Anyways, one of the more common training programs I delivered was a day and a half long, and was taught to groups of around 20 people at a time. So I would schedule the full day of training followed by a morning session the next day. And then everyone would go back to their regular duties for the second afternoon. Rather than making 20 people come to me downtown, I would host a session at an office that is closer to where the participants worked. This would often add another 20 to 40 minutes to my commute via some combination of subway, streetcar, bus, and walking. so I would simply adjust my training schedule based on the extra commute time. If it took an extra 30 minutes to get to the location, I would start the session 30 minutes later, and I would normally start the process of heading home to the train 30 minutes before my official end time, so I could catch my normal 5 p.m. train home. The full day session really only took maybe 6 to 6.5 hours, so my class would already be gone, and I would just do some paperwork until it was time to go. The arrangement seemed to work well for everyone involved and had the blessing of my direct supervisor. One day, a company-wide email went out. All management and exempt staff must start and finish their workday at an official work location, no exceptions. Failure to comply may result in termination. Cue malicious compliance. Instead of commuting directly to wherever the workshop was being held, I would commute to my office, log into my computer, then log out and start commuting to the workshop location. Since I was no longer taking the most direct route from home and was now traveling from the downtown office, this would eat up an hour plus of my time on the clock. I would then end the workshop early, commute back an hour plus to my office, just in time to get there for 4:30 p.m., log in and out of my computer, and start my commute home. So my day-and-a-half workshop was now a 2-day workshop, and I was still getting home on time. The people attending the workshops didn't care because they could take their time showing up in the morning, and I would dismiss them early at the end of each day. They were union and were not office workers, so there was absolutely nothing they could do in that last hour of their day. By the time they got to a work location, set up, etc., the day would be over. This cost the company thousands in lost time and productivity, as the 20 employees attending the workshop were no longer performing any of their regular work for the afternoon of the second day, as they did during my original schedule. Often, additional staff had to be brought in on overtime to cover the workload. This continued until COVID hit. After that, I was able to deliver the workshops over Zoom, from the comfort of my own home, and save the entire commute, which prior to COVID, I was told was not an option. 3. I was around 10 or 12 when this happened. Our old next-door neighbor was a nosy, lazy, stay-at-home mom. She liked to complain about almost everything. My sister, 5 years older, had friends ranging from the same age to a few years older, and they would often come to our house for most of every weekend. Sometimes it would be a couple of friends, others up to 15 or so. The neighbor, surprisingly, never complained about a bunch of teenagers being at our house every weekend. Until she decided to, I guess. They never made a lot of noise. My dad worked weekends, and the number one rule was do not keep Dad awake or wake him up. This was during school holidays in summer, so my dad had the following day off. My sister had 3 friends over, and that night, all they did was watch a movie. It wasn't loud. Dad couldn't hear it from our veranda. They didn't even stay late. They went home about 9:30. Come just after 10 p.m., 2 cops rock up on our doorstep. A noise complaint from our next-door neighbor about a wild party. They were obviously confused as they were greeted by a grumpy late-30s guy in a dressing gown, a book in one hand, smoke in the other, cup of tea on the table in front of him. Just chilling on his veranda, instead of the rager they'd been told about. Dad was like, "Look, I hate the kids coming here, but tonight, 3 kids were watching a movie. They left over an hour ago. I don't know what the fuck she's on about." He was pissed. He didn't enjoy our house being the designated hangout place, but as Mum always said, at least we know where our daughter is. But even that night he wasn't annoyed because it was a small group watching a movie. If it was any other night he'd be annoyed because just come over and tell them they're being too loud, but don't call the cops because they're watching a movie. Our neighbor would always have afternoon naps at 1 p.m. Her bedroom was 5 minutes from our driveway, so pretty close. Our front yard was also huge. Our house was pretty small and sat over a quarter acre. 2/3 of that quarter acre was our front yard. Well, the next day the lawn needed mowing. It being summer, our summer temps go into the 40s in Celsius. Dad would normally mow as early as possible in the most efficient way possible, It would normally take him 40 minutes, not that day. He waited until 12:45, then he started the mower. And did it in the most convoluted way possible, 2 hours of mowing. Then, being the reasonable camper that he is, he decided it was time to count the tent pegs. They're kept in a metal army box. There's about 300 pegs in there because why not, apparently. So out to the driveway right next to her bedroom window, 1 peg at a time. He took it out, stood up, and threw it full force at the driveway. Bang, clang, clash, you get the picture. Then one at a time he picked them up off the driveway, stood up, threw them full force into the metal box. Bang, clang, clash. She came out to scowl at him a couple of times but didn't say a word. He was extra cranky that night due to the probable heat stroke, but he always had such glee when recounting the story. 4. Some time ago, I worked in a medical specialty office. It was ID, or infectious disease, as a medical assistant. Sidebar: I used to work in the food industry, and was always told that I wouldn't ever contribute to society or do anything meaningful with my life. While I absolutely loved working as a chef and baker at the time, I wanted to do more with my life and prove to myself that I'm not as useless as people made me out to be. Not that I believe that for 1 second. But in my culture, if you aren't a businessman or a doctor, you're lower than everyone else. It's pretty terrible, but that's how the culture is. I now live in the US, and it's been pretty good. Back to the story. I had graduated top 3 of my class and was certified through the AAMA and scored in the 90th percentile, so I knew my stuff. But I've never worked a white-collar job in my life, so I was afraid that I would seem out of place. I did my externship at this ID clinic in my town, and they loved my interpersonal skills. They loved my work and stated that I would be offered a job at the end of my externship. I was elated. I was so happy to have a job secured and have a foot in the door to the medical field. It turns out my blue-collar experience helped me relate with a lot of our patients, and they appreciated my work more for it. As my time went on, my experience working in the medical field became less about the money and more about the people I can help with my direct patient care. They weren't just charts, medical record numbers, or MRNs, and diagnoses. They were Jeff, who ran the local farmer's market, or Meg, who worked with kids at the Y. I cared for my patients, and our repeats would always look forward to coming back to see me and chat. I loved working with my patients. So at the end of my externship, I was extended an offer of employment for a decent amount of money. It was more than my other classmates were offered at their practices, but still not a whole lot, and I took it. I was to be the medical assistant in charge of direct patient care. This meant checking in, rooming, dealing with prescriptions, performing and searching for labs, packing wounds, and doing dressing changes. Being officially part of the office now, I was determined to work my ass off and show myself and my colleagues that I could do it. I continued to do my work and care for patients. However, over time, I would notice certain things that weren't in my job duties that I could do that would help care for the patients. Certain things like calling their doctors for updated orders, or checking for records from local hospitals. Also helping patients find good home health or skilled nursing facilities, generally the medical scheduler's job. This also included looking into insurance coverage and billing, and checking referral statuses, referral coordinators, among other things. Doing these tasks meant a bit more work on my end, but also meant the best care that I could offer for my patients. This went on for a year, and my patients were happy and willing to come to appointments. Apparently, not a whole lot of people like to come to a building that has the words, "Infectious diseases," in big print on its side. Then one day, out of the blue, I'm called into my supervisor. Young, naive me thought, oh great, they see how hard I'm working and I'm finally getting recognized. Maybe they'll promote me to lead. Nope. My boss, Shelley, told me that I'm working too hard and sticking my fingers into too many pots. I asked where this was coming from, and she stated that I was staying more than 5 minutes late too many times, and it's because I'm doing too much work. She said, "We can't keep paying you this overtime. I think I was maybe making 30 minutes OT at most. She said that's still too much, I'm doing too much work. I was baffled, absolutely stunned. I thought I was doing the practice a service, but she undermined the entirety of the last year's hard work I put in. I was frustrated and a bit upset, but tried my best to remain professional, so I asked her what she would like me to do. And the next words out of her mouth were the ones she would come to regret. Well, I see you're doing a lot of tasks that are meant for other positions. Maybe you should stop doing those and just stay in your lane. She then proceeded to write me up for trying to abuse the time clock. Alrighty then. Cue malicious compliance. I asked her to send me a list of exactly what my job duties are, which she was happy to do. It listed most of what I was originally meant to do, except it didn't include dressing changes and packing wounds. I saw this and immediately knew this would be trouble. For my boss. You see, she was the only other medical assistant on our end of the office that was certified to deal with minor wound care and dressings. At that point, since I was the main contact for patients, that would fall onto her plate. So I told each of my patients that I won't be doing any of that extra work, because it goes against the practice's wishes and I was told not to. All of them understood, but it's tough to get patients to keep appointments when things are delayed. Not long after the order was issued, I got my first page for a wound pack. Excellent. One thing to note about my boss is that she absolutely abhors feet. And one thing to note about infectious disease clinics is that we dealt with a lot of diabetic foot infections. At least 2 or 3 a day. Doc wants to see how it's healing, so he removes the wrap and unpacks the foot. Spent a little extra time with the patient, and now has to get to his next appointment. I'm paged by the doc to pack the foot wet to dry. No problem, doc. Let me get Shelley for you. He gives me kind of an odd look, but continues to his next appointment. Shelley gloves up, and as soon as she passes the threshold to the room and notices it's a diabetic foot, is holding back her gags and immediately sweating. I pass the room and she asks for my help. As calmly as I could, I turned and said, Sorry, boss. Packing wounds isn't on my list. Can't do it. Just staying in my lane. By the way, the 2 o'clock in 3 is a through-and-through foot infection. Probably should get that packed soon, too. I'm glad we were wearing masks because she couldn't see the massive shit-eating grin I had in my face throughout the whole encounter. She tried to write me up about disobeying orders, but I had spoken with my GM and she was behind me. Instead, she ended up getting written up for trying to put wound packs back in my list after she told me I did too much work. She ended up having to do part of the medical scheduler's job, part of the referral coordinator's job, and part of the billing officer's job, as she had let go one of her front desk staff because there was not enough work to go around. There was plenty of work. I was doing it. She didn't last long after that. The burnout got to her, and she stepped down from her supervisor position 4 months after that. They ended up hiring another super, and I left the practice shortly after I got the vid. They told me to come back to work in another 3 days, and still very symptomatic, so I told them I wouldn't endanger my patients like that and to shove it. Last I heard, they have an entirely new front office staff, and they're perpetually short-handed. Should have let me drive my own path, instead of staying in your silly lanes. 5. To keep it vague, my old company was a fairly large REIT, roughly 10 billion. I was a part of a very nice M&A shop that was typically the black sheep of the company. It felt like anything we did was just a hassle overall, and it wasn't really worth the company's time to entertain these acquisitions anymore. I was a part of the minuscule-sized deal team, 3 of us including myself, that closed over 60 deals per year, 45 to 50 active deals at one time. Typically, each deal took about 4 to 9 months from start to finish, depending on the seller's competence level and organization. This was my first job out of college. I knew the career path I wanted to take was going to require long hours and no vacations. But typically, in finance, the salary will reflect that commitment. Well, For this job, I was making $52K a year, working 80-hour weeks, $12.50 an hour gross pay. After my first full year, I went to the VP of the department and requested a 20% raise. I was told the basic inflation spiel and got a 2% cost of living adjustment. I think it's important to note that after I left this company, I found out the same VP received a $2 million bonus. Fast forward a couple of months. Every year, the company has a meeting where the entire company, 300-ish people, meets at a hotel. They do this to give updates as to what the company has done so far, where they're going, and for team building, of course. In reality, this was a multi-million-dollar event to pat the backs of the executives that really didn't do much in reality. As a part of this event, anyone in the company is allowed to send in anonymized questions to the CEO, and he will read and respond to it if he thinks it's something worth talking about. Just before this company event, 5 people had resigned from other departments in the company. Every one of them almost doubled their salaries at their new jobs. So I decided to ask the question, how do you plan to retain talent when there are other companies offering 2 times the money with half of the workload? The CEO decided this question was hilarious and read it aloud laughing and responded, "If you find that job," with finger quotes as if it wasn't real, "you better take it. Goodbye." After being treated terribly the last 1.5 years, including missing my grandfather's 88th birthday, partly due to a last-second PowerPoint that ended up not even being used, I decided that was the final nail in the coffin. I spoke with one of the recently resigned co-workers about his new company, and soon after a recruiter from his company reached out to me. I go through the interview process and get the job. I more than doubled my pay when taking the 20% end-of-year bonus into account, and I even got a 10K signing bonus. The story doesn't end here. As I gave notice to my wonderful manager who taught me everything I know, she first told me she hates me because she is going to have to take over my 19 current deals. But then, shockingly, she confides that after 7 years of working at the company, she is ready to move to greener pastures as well. I decided to call the recruiter that reached out to me originally and ask if there are any other positions open at my new company. She says yes. They interview her, and she gets a job as well a month later. 2 down, 1 to go. The final co-worker standing was not hard to convince as he saw 52 deals suddenly pile onto his desk while he was already underwater doing the same 80-hour weeks I did. I worked with him to spruce up his resume and get the wheels turning. After 2 interviews, he was given a verbal job offer with an in-writing letter expected the next week. All said and done, all 3 of us ended up doubling our old salaries. The old company is now scrambling to replace us with over $100 million worth of deals that will grind to a halt when my last coworker makes his departure. My new gig does not feel like real life. I have a fantastic boss that respects my time outside of the office, to the point that he gave me 2 weeks in between jobs to unwind after my previous role. My workload is 30% of what I used to do, as well. My old manager got the same 2-week treatment and is currently enjoying her time off and will start in the middle of October. If I was only given that 20% raise. Hey everybody, Hellfreezer here, and thank you very much for listening to Revenge is Ice Cream, episode 180. And thank you very much to everybody who allowed me to use their stories in this video. And before you go, if you could please hit the like button and share the video with friends and family members. And thank you very much to those of you who do. Right, let's see, no special shout-outs today, so we'll move right along to Hellfreezer's question of the day. And today's question is... Alright, this, if you don't want to answer, of course I will respect it. Which crush did you have when you were younger, like in your teens, that you still kind of have a crush on them and never really went away? I'm going to name 2. One is Diane Udale. Her name was Jet. She used to be on the British version of the Gladiators. I liked her. And the other was Gillian Anderson. And those 2 crushes have never changed as I've gotten older. Decades long at this point. So feel free, if you are comfortable sharing, of course, to let me know who yours are, the ones you've never quite let go of. Leave your answer in a comment below. Okay, and with that, I'm going to head off for now. So until next time, thank you very much for listening, and take very good care of yourself.